Have horror movies gotten worse over the past decade? What did the genre look like back in 2014 compared to last year, 2024? Well, I researched over 100 movies to find out. So let's dive in. Twenty 2014 gave us movies like The Babadook, As Above So Below, and What We Do in the Shadows, bringing us horror fans a great slate of classics that are still talked about today. Now, cut to 2024, we were given masterclass films like The Substance and Nosferatu, as well as insane horror films like Terrifier 3 and Smile 2. But looking back, has horror gotten worse throughout the years? And with that, how has horror changed exactly? And what criteria do we even use to compare the two? In this video, I'm going to share my analysis of the 2 years with you, as well as conclude at the end of the video which year was better for horror fans. And today when I'm talking about best and worst, a lot of it is going to rely on IMDb scores and Letterboxd scores, as well as opinions on Reddit, my personal opinion, things like that. So it's a good combination of my opinion, other people's opinions, and then just straight up facts like the numbers that are going to determine which year was better. So the topics we're going to touch on today are going to be the best and worst of both years. We're going to be talking about how many remakes and sequels were there compared to original ideas, and subgenres and themes, and how scary these movies are. We're going to be talking about my personal opinion, of course, and then we're going to dive into the numbers. We're going to talk about the box office numbers and, like I mentioned, IMDb scores and Letterboxd scores. We're going to be talking about a lot of movies today, so if at any point you get a spark to watch any of these, make sure to scan this QR code. It'll take you to a page that'll show you where they're all streaming, and it'll take you right to it. So what were some notable horror films that came out in 2014? We have What We Do in the Shadows, Dead Snow 2, The Babadook, Housebound, The Purge, Anarchy, As Above So Below, one of my favorite found footage horror movies, Starry Eyes, that's a hidden gem on there, Life After Beth, comedy, Annabelle, Tusk, Rec 4, Ouija, VHS Viral, and Oculus, just to name a few. And just last year we got movies like The Substance, Nosferatu, Strange Darling, Heretic, Late Night with the Devil, The First Omen, Terrifier 3, Lisa Frankenstein, Trap, Sting. Again, a great smattering of horror films that we got last year. Just looking at these 2 years, let's just admit that we are kind of spoiled as horror fans. Now, the top 5 best rated movies from 2014 were What We Do in the Shadows, Dead Snow 2, The Babadook, Housebound, and The Purge, Anarchy. It's an interesting combination of movies there. We go over to 2024. The top 5 were The Substance, Nosferatu, Strange Darling, Heretic, and Late Night with the Devil. Now, one thing to note right off the bat is that the top 5 for 2024 are all rated 7 or above for IMDb. And in 2014, they only one is rated above a 7.0, and that's What We Do in the Shadows. It's kind of interesting. What We Do in the Shadows, it's a comedy, was the best horror movie of 2014. It's a great movie. Spawned a TV series, so not digging on that at all, and it's got a better rating than The Substance and Nosferatu, but 5 horror movies from 2024 that average a 7.0 or higher. Interesting. Now, what do people think online? I did check a couple of Reddit threads on r/horror to see what people were saying about 2014, and it's interesting because a lot of people choose It Follows, and I have to take a quick side tangent to tell you about my rule about release dates and what year I include movies in. So let's take last year, for example. Late Night with the Devil technically came out in 2023, but didn't get a wide release until 2024. And it's included on a bunch of people's 2024 best horror movie lists, right? So technically came out in 2023, wide release in 2024. Now, looking back at a lot of people's favorite horror movie of 2014, people do include It Follows, and I would too if I included it as a 2014 movie. But going by this rule, the same criteria, it would actually be a 2015 movie because it had its premiere, I think it was at Cannes Film Festival in 2014, but it didn't get its wide release until 2015. So that means that if we're going by the same rule, it's a 2015 movie, okay? And that's how this video is going to be. I'm not going to mention It Follows, even though it is a great movie. We'll use it in a future video where we talk about 2015 versus 2025 or something. So stay tuned for that. But I just had to go by my own rules and the rules that everybody else is using recently to talk about It Follows. So I'm not going to include It Follows, but let's see what some other people's favorite horror movies were from 2014. As Above, So Below. Again, that's possibly my favorite found footage horror film. One of the best made found footage horror films. The Babadook, that's kind of a divisive film. A lot of people hate the kid in that. movie. It's been a while since I've rewatched it, but I also remember not really liking it very much. We got Creep, found footage. 2014 was such a great year for found footage, especially compared to last year. But okay, maybe we'll get to that when we're talking about subgenres later on. A girl walks home alone at night. People are talking about Housebound, Taking Of Deborah Logan. Again, It Follows. A lot of It Follows. Awkward. We're not talking about It Follows today. Last Shift. I really like Last Shift. Now let's talk about a few of the duds that came out in 2014. Let's not just praise each year. We're going to talk about the bad movies that came out too. Now in 2014, we got movies like Zombievers, which is kind of like a ride or die movie. You either hate it or you love it. A lot of people ride for Zombievers. I personally don't, but it's on there. Ouija was a major letdown, and luckily Mike Flanagan came in for the sequel and kind of revived that a little bit. VHS Viral, the only VHS entry that I consider to be bad, came out in 2014. But what about 2024? 2024 had some crazy bad movies as well. We got to talk about The Strangers Chapter 1, probably one of the worst horror films to come out in the past decade, I would say. It's rated a 4.6 on IMDb. I feel like that's a little too high if you ask me. And they just announced Strangers Chapter 2. Woo! Night Swim is on there. Not very many people liked Night Swim. Tarot. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know that I personally really like Tarot, but I understand why people hate it. And it is one of the worst rated horror movies of the year at a 4.8. So duds all around. Neither year was perfect, and it's kind of hard to be perfect with so many movies coming out. But yeah, just to note on a few of the worst movies that came out each year. So those were kind of the best and worst movies that came out each year. Now, interestingly, in 2014, there are 2 comedies in the top 5 horror movies. Actually, 3 maybe if you count Dead Snow 2 as a comedy, which is a pretty hilarious movie. So like maybe horror has gotten a little more serious over the past decade, because top 5, some people might consider The Substance comedy. I don't really. But yeah, The Substance, Nosferatu, Strange Darling, Heretic, and Late Night with the Devil. No comedy there. The first time we hit comedy is maybe Down in Abigail, if you consider that comedy. Lisa Frankenstein, if you count that as comedy. So yeah, maybe 2024 is just a lot more serious than 2014. So maybe caters to a different type of horror fan. Now, another contributing factor that people use as like the downfall of horror, or why horror isn't as good anymore, is the fact that we are remaking movies or only doing sequels, no original ideas, right? So let's compare both years and see like which year had more remakes, which year had more sequels. I think we can kind of use that as a criteria for comparing the two. So back in 2014, I didn't find any remakes that came out that year, which is a huge green flag for 2014. In 2024, there was The Strangers Chapter 1, Speak No Evil, and The Crow, just off the top of my head. Those were 3 remakes that came out last year, and they were all... Speak No Evil, I have a personal vendetta against. I just don't even like the original. I did not watch the remake, but I know some people like it. It's rated pretty highly on IMDb, so whatever. Crow, people hated. Strangers Chapter 1, people hated, so definite red flags for 2024. What about sequels? Back in 2014, we had Dead Snow 2, The Purge, Anarchy, Annabelle, Rec 4, VHS Viral, The Woman in Black 2, Paranormal Activity The Marked Ones, Sharknado 2, and in 2024, we had Smile 2, The First Omen, Terrifier 3, A Quiet Place Day 1, Alien Romulus, Hellboy, the Hellboy movie, I didn't watch that, I think it was called The Crooked Man or something, Maxine, Apartment 7A, Winnie the Pooh 2, and The Platform 2. I know a couple of those are prequels, so this is including sequels and prequels. So in that category, I would have to say that 2014 had some of the best original ideas coming out of it. 2024 was kind of a stinker when it came to remakes for sure. And then the sequels and prequels, which ones worked and which ones didn't. I mean, The First Omen was a fantastic movie, and it was a prequel, and it was like, what is it, the 7th or 8th in the Omen franchise? Terrifier 3 hit huge numbers for the horror genre. Quiet Place Day 1 was, spoiler alert, the highest box office numbers for a horror movie. So it's got that going for it. Alien Romulus, I loved Alien Romulus, one of the more beautiful films of 2024. Maxine, people were kind of up and down on it. Apartment 7A is a prequel. I didn't watch it, but it's a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. Kind of forget where I was going with that rambling about the sequels at this point, but I think I was comparing the sequels between 2024 and 2014. I would have to say that as far as quality of the sequels and prequels, 2024 probably wins out, but I think overall 2014 kind of wins this category for having more original ideas and fewer sequels and definitely fewer remakes. How has horror changed between 2024 and 2014 as far as the subgenres, themes, and scariness? Let's talk about similar genres between the 2 years. One that stood out to me was vampires. Back in 2014, we got What We Do in the Shadows and Dracula Untold. And then this year, last year, 2024, we got Nosferatu and Abigail. So 2 like really big vampire movies, which was pretty interesting. We had movies dealing with time. There's Time Lapse from 2014, which is a great underrated gem about a camera that takes pictures, that produces pictures that were taken 24 hours in the future. It's a great one that came out in 2014. Last year we got Caddo Lake, which also deals with time. Slashers, 2024 definitely had better slashers, I would say. Maybe not better to me, but just better overall, and at least like movies that have more staying power. In 2024, we got Terrifier 3 and In a Violent Nature were big notable slashers. Back in 2014, we got Clown and The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which I feel like both of those from 2014 were not talked about very much these days, but I feel like Terrifier 3 and probably In a Violent Nature are going to be talked about for quite a while. Body horror, obviously the best horror movie from last year, The Substance, was a body horror movie, and one of the only comparable movies that I found from 2014 was Tusk, which, yes, they are both body horror, but still very different films, I would say. And The Substance is certainly a more enjoyable watch for me, although I do like Tusk, but just poor Justin Long every time. And one other interesting parallel that I found was like romance. Back in 2014, we had Life After Beth, which stars Aubrey Plaza, and it's where Aubrey Plaza becomes a zombie essentially. And Lisa Frankenstein, we got the romantic zombie film as well. So really interesting parallels there that we got 2 romantic zombie films. As far as creature features, last year we got Sting about spiders and again Zombievers from 2014. Found footage. Let's talk about found footage for a second because 2014 was some of the best found footage came out in 2014. 2024 was kind of lacking. We got Late Night with the Devil, which some people kind of considered found footage. It is, in a sense. It's maybe not traditional found footage. I know Frogman came out last year, but as far as heavy hitters, like maybe one found footage from 2024, whereas we go back to 2014. As Above, So Below, we got The Taking of Deborah Logan. The Borderlands / Final Prayer came out in 2014. Unfriended came out in 2014. So yeah, just a lot of found footage horror movies. Exists, the one about Bigfoot, came out in 2014. So yeah, a great year for found footage compared to 2024 for certain. What about like themes or scariness? Obviously, like What We Do in the Shadows, Dead Snow 2, Housebound. Actually, Housebound does have a few scary moments because it's like a haunted house comedy. What We Do in the Shadows and Dead Snow 2 I didn't find to be super scary. They are, Dead Snow 2 is very gory. I know some people found Nosferatu scary. Last year, Oddity definitely scared me. Like, it was a very terrifying movie. Longlegs had its moments. Smile 2, The Creature, I think, creeped a lot of people out.
No, I will not let this thing use me.
Exuma, Asian folk horror, that came out last year, had a lot of great moments as far as like scares. Back in 2014, what were the scariest movies here? Creep, Taking of Deborah Logan, Last Shift. Those were both had their moments.
Do you want to get out of here alive?
Annabelle. I wasn't a fan of Annabelle, but I know it has some great jump scares. Oculus came out in 2014, and that had a lot of good scares. So as far as like scariness, I wouldn't say that horror has gotten less scary. It might actually be the opposite because now it seems like it's a little bit more serious, at least for the big releases. The point might go to 2024 here as far as like scariness, but the subgenres, it's pretty even. I'd probably give it to 2014 because there are more found footage horror movies that came out. But yeah, that's kind of a good look at the subgenres and the scariness compared between the years. I know you're asking yourself now, what is my opinion as far as which year was better? And this is a tough one. Some of my favorite movies came out in 2014. As Above, So Below, Creep, again, those found footage, just great films. Dead Snow 2, Last Shift, Tusk, Oculus, some other movies that I haven't mentioned much of. The Quiet Ones came out that year. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I've briefly mentioned. Afflicted is an interesting alien horror film that came out that year. Don't think I would say it's my favorite though, but I mean, 2024 had so many big, heavy hitters. I love Longlegs. I love Alien Romulus, The Substance. I didn't like A Quiet Place Day One. If I had to eliminate 1 year of horror movies and only have the other one remaining, that's a tough one. But can I live without As Above, So Below? Can I live without The Substance? I like 2024 better. I would have to eliminate 2014, even though I'd eliminate some of my favorite horror movies, Oculus, Tusk, As Above, So Below. That's a tough sell. You gotta let me know which year you would eliminate yourself and how hard of a decision it was for you, because yeah, that was tough. I can't do that. Now, a lot of what we've talked about so far is opinion-based. Reviews, my personal opinion, the scariness, which is a very subjective topic. But what do the numbers say? Let's take a look at the box office. Now, I took the stats from the top 20 movies from each year to see which year had the biggest box office numbers. Now, I kind of had to do a double take because the difference in the numbers is kind of astonishing. The worldwide box office for horror films in 2014 was $713 million, which is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But let's compare it to 2024. The box office numbers for 2024 horror films was, drumroll, $1.7 billion, over twice as much as 2014 made, which is insane. And even if we included more movies on either side, the last movies that were included on this list for 2014 were only bringing in like $7,000. So like we'd have to include a lot more movies to even get close to $1 billion for 2014, and 2024 hit $1.7 billion, which is crazy. The highest domestic box office numbers came from A Quiet Place Day One in 2024. That brought in $139 million. Worldwide, Alien Romulus took that crown with $350 million. And for 2014, domestically, the biggest box office numbers came from Annabelle at $84 million, a franchise film. And Annabelle also took the worldwide with $256 million. Right behind it was Ouija, which was a dud, unfortunately, but it brought in $50 million domestically and $103 million worldwide. So based on the box office numbers, that win clearly goes to 2024. And you'll always hear it. People aren't going to the movie theaters anymore and this and that. Horror's gotten worse, but the numbers themselves just kind of contradict that theory. Now, one last criteria we're going to use to compare 2024 horror with 2014 horror is IMDb and Letterboxd ratings. This is kind of an objective criteria that we can use. It's not opinion based. It's just straight by the numbers data analysis, which I love to use as defense when I'm defending movies and stuff, because you can always have your personal opinions about this movie sucks, that movie sucks. And I've talked about it in this video already. Speak No Evil. People love that movie, but I don't. And Violent Nature, a lot of people love that movie, but I don't. But these are the numbers. You can't really argue with straight up numbers, especially when you have the box office numbers and these ratings. So let's look it over. So for both years, I kind of took the top 10 movies and the bottom 10 movies from that original list of 58 movies, took their IMDb scores and averaged them out to see which one is better. We're going to start with IMDb. So when we look at 2014, again, just for reference, What We Do in the Shadows is rated in 7.6 on IMDb. And the lowest number on that list is VHS Viral with a 4.2. And when we take all of those movies and average them out, we get an average score of 5.94 IMDb score for horror in 2014, which isn't bad, especially in relation to horror movies. Now let's take it over to 2024, where, for reference, the top rated movie from 2024 is lower than the 2014 movie, What We Do in the Shadows. The Substance is at a 7.3, so is Nosferatu, but Substance has more reviews. So we have 7.3 at the top, and at the bottom we have 4.6 from The Strangers Chapter 1. And when we average out all of those movies, we get a 6.29 average IMDb score. So we're just going by ratings on IMDb. 2024 is going to win it out. Now over to Letterboxd scores. What We Do in the Shadows holds a 4.1 over on Letterboxd, and the lowest that I can find on this list is actually 1.8 from VHS Viral and Ouija both have a 1.8. Averaging out all of those movies on Letterboxd, we get a 2.84 average Letterboxd ratings, which I believe below a 3 is kind of not great on Letterboxd. So little differing opinions between IMDb and Letterboxd. And in 2024, Substance has a 3.8 currently, and the lowest I can find on this list is a 1.7 from Night Swim. So when we average all of those out from Letterboxd, it's a 3.06 Letterboxd rating. So by the numbers, you can't argue with them. 2024 is just a straight up better year by the numbers. Box office, IMDb rating, Letterboxd rating. 2024 is just, it hits better with the audience. Now, of course, 2014 movies have had 10 years of reviews to kind of level out and get a true rating. So we'll give it that caveat, but 2024, it's recency bias and maybe a lot of people haven't seen these movies still. So we'll see how that develops over time, but for right now, that's what the numbers look like. If we look at just the numbers alone across reviews and box office, it appears that horror, in fact, has not gotten worse, but possibly a lot better recently. But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you like 2014's roster of movies more than 2024, or the other way around? Let me know in the comments, as well as what other years you'd like me to compare. This has been Nonstop Horror. My name is Cameron, and if you liked this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you're looking for a movie to watch, go check out this playlist where I have dozens of movie recommendations for you.